Welcome back to Magic Hour Season 2. I am your host, Taylor Page.
And I'm Claire Delamar. We're so excited to be back for season 2. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
I could not be more excited to be back. And I feel like that is a sign that you're doing the right thing. Like, usually when I end things and I feel a sense of relief or excitement about what could come next, it's like, yeah, that thing was meant to end. But when we pause Magic Hour, I was like literally the entire time missing it. And I was looking forward to this recording date with you so much today. So I'm just so happy to be back.
I know, me too. It's been such an amazing journey and offering that we've gotten to create and put into the world. And everyone's feedback has just been so incredible. Today, I was reading your emails, and you guys are just amazing. And we're so lucky to have you and be in this community with you. So I'm just so excited to be back for season 2.
In that vein, I'm so grateful for the hummingbirds sharing the podcast. Like every other day, I get somebody being like, your podcast was referred to me, or I tell every single person I know about your podcast. Like we could not do it without the community. So big group hug.
Yes. We love you guys.
So, before we get into all of the exciting stuff, if you're new to the podcast and you're only finding us right here, right now, welcome to season 2. I'm Taylor Page, your host. As I said, I'm an angelic intuitive and evidential medium. I'm an astrologer. You can hear all about my journey in episode 101, which is Welcome to Magic Hour. And the intention of this podcast is to prep your brain to recognize magic, to look for magic, to expect magic, and to expand your perspective about what magic can look like. And so every episode, we will bring in different guests or have solo episodes with just Claire and I, where we discuss magical things around the world. And that intention hasn't changed for us in season 2. We're here to bring more magic into your conscious mind, your subconscious mind, your periphery, and your belief in what's possible.
I know for me personally, just being a part of it has been such a great way for me to notice and connect with the magic in my life. And Taylor, you'll love this. So years ago, my mom's a painter, and she painted these 2 beautiful pictures, and I asked her to give them to me as a Christmas present, and she did. And I have been meaning to frame them and put them up on my wall for 2 years. And I finally did. And one of them has 2 hummingbirds in it.
Oh my gosh. And it's so beautiful, the timing that you finally hung them, which no judgment because I'm the same exact way. That's such a beautiful synchronicity. I really love that. And the listeners have been sending so many hummingbird stories that have happened to them. So I just find that so, so beautiful. Before we get into the listener questions and stories, I want to talk a little bit about my trip. So I was in London for Christmas and Florence for New Year's this year, which was so special. I'm so grateful. It was such a magical trip, and it was such a nice time getting even closer with my husband's side of the family. I just feel very grateful and lucky to be able to do that. So for those of you who have listened to episode 101, Welcome to Magic Hour, I'm not sure if I talk about it on there, but I probably have somewhere that I've always worn a promise ring to my angels and my guides. And that's something I talk about in the Be Your Own Angelic Intuitive workshop. It's a ritual that I highly recommend, is some sort of jewelry to remember your promise to always try to show up as your highest self. And so the origin of that promise ring came on the heels of a really abusive, awful relationship that I was in for 4.5 years. And long story short, on Halloween, I was dressed like the Bride of Frankenstein when I was playing video games, streaming for my community back then. And my boyfriend at the time texted me that he was going to hook up with some other girl and he wanted to break up with me after 4.5 years. And he was like super drunk. He came home super drunk. Things got a little bit violent. I had to leave the house at like 3 a.m. in like a night shirt, just like escape. I got to a hotel. I was looking in the mirror and I did not recognize myself anymore. Like my light was completely dim. And I just made a promise to myself in that moment that I said, never again. Never again will I let myself be abused, be treated this way, and I'll never again abandon myself. And so that was the lowest moment I've ever had in my life. It was truly my dark night of the soul. I was sick in my body. I was in a wrong career path. I just felt so lost and so depressed. Side note to the story is that at that time, at the time of getting into this relationship with this person, Neptune was in Pisces. That was in 2011. So fast forward, I'm in Florence with my amazing husband on New Year's Eve, which is just to show you that no matter how dark your circumstances look, never give up, because something so magical can be just on the other side of it. And fear loves to lie and say it's going to be this way forever, whether you're physically sick, emotionally sick. Fear loves to make you feel like it's never going to change, but change is the only constant. So I was out in Florence with him and we were clubbing and having this great like New Year's Eve. It was so awesome. So we get home to the hotel room, and every night I take off my rings, I put them on the table, and I go get ready for bed. So I take off all of my rings, and all of a sudden I hear this like clattering, like metal on stone. Even though I was nowhere near the table, neither was Ari. I look, and my promise ring to my angels has vanished. And we look all over the room. Like, we looked the next morning, we looked that night, we were shining flashlights. It's not a huge hotel room. You know, when you're in a city, and especially in Europe, things are a little smaller than here in the US. Like, we searched every single corner of it. It was gone. It was so strange because at first I witnessed my inner villain voice being like, that means that your angels don't want to work with you anymore. Like all of these sort of superstitious things that came up, which was a good reminder that we can never get too reliant on anything outside of ourselves in an external way for validation of our internal connection. So that was a good reminder for me because I got a little too attached to that ring. And so I was in this space between sleep and awake. And I was asking my angels, like, why did this ring disappear? And they basically just showed me that I'm on a new staircase. Like, that the cycle was over with what that promise ring meant. I fulfilled that promise, and that now I'm on to a new lesson, a new staircase to climb, a new promise. And the promise of that ring, I already had that in my heart. I didn't need a ring for it. And that ring was a reminder to never let myself be abused. And 2024 and 2023 was so much about rooting out abuse in my family. So it's like that relationship was one thing, but that relationship stemmed from childhood things that I recreated in that relationship. And it was like a master class in 23 and 24 of like deep healing. And it was so significant to me that in the very first hour of 2025, the ring vanished. And it was like, this is truly a new chapter. And what's so interesting is that I bought that ring in like, I can't remember if it was 2015 or 2016, but it was like the end of a decade, the end of an era, like the first second of 2025. And what's also really significant, I'm sure I've spoken about this at some point on the podcast, is that snake is one of my main animal guides. And this is the year of the snake in Chinese zodiac. So that was also really interesting to me because if you've listened to the pod, you know that snake is a very sacred animal to goddess energy. And the Ouroboros, or the snake eating its tail, is like the new ring that I think I'm going to get, because it's going to like sort of signify an ending of an era, a shedding of a snake skin, and that goddess energy that I'm committing to moving forward. Not that I haven't already, but I just love that symbol. It was just so many different synchronicities. And Neptune, the planet of like fantasy, illusion, spirituality, is in the final degrees of Pisces currently, where it was when I entered into that relationship in 2011. And Pisces itself is a sign that within my mom's side of the family, almost all of the women are Pisces, and there's definitely major lessons with masculine energy on that side. So there have just been so many synchronicities the more I sit and unravel it. And the way it just vanished into thin air was truly wild.
I love this story so much, Taylor. Oh, I have chills. It made me emotional. I just think it's such a beautiful thing to acknowledge and recognize too. It's like sometimes we do these things for ourselves that are about our growth and our healing, and they're so powerful. And usually in the beginning, they're difficult. And then oftentimes we don't notice once we've really taken the lesson and really grown and emerged, because now we're this new version of self that we're like not even thinking about all that stuff anymore because we've grown and changed. And so I just think it's such a beautiful benchmark of like, yeah, you were in a place where you needed a ring to remind you. And you're no longer that version of self that needs that type of promise ring. You made that promise and you committed to it. And look at the world you've created for yourself. Like thinking about that version of yourself standing in front of the mirror and not knowing who you were. And now thinking about who you are and the people you're surrounded by, your beautiful husband, your family, your friendships. Like you created a world and a self that was in direct relation to what you saw was missing from that woman in the mirror. And now I feel like this was just a little nod to acknowledge how far you've come and this new chapter of like, those lessons have been learned. And now I get to embark on a new, even deeper, broader journey of self and exploration. And it's just so cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I feel that, and like the message that came through was that the promise already is integrated into my heart. I don't need any external reminder. And the family stuff was like the final boss in the lesson. And just a little side note about crystal jewelry, because this promise ring was a claddagh ring with the heart made of black tourmaline, which is a very protective stone. When crystal jewelry breaks or disappears, it basically means that it's done its job for you. And so sometimes that will happen. And it's like, okay, it's time to work with either a new crystal or to bury that old one to the earth or to gift it to someone else. And that also felt very significant to me, that it was a black tourmaline ring, because it's like, you don't need me to protect you. You're protecting yourself at this point. And I think that's really beautiful too.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And that's actually like a big lesson that I'm trying to learn with my own stuff and my own development. Like, how can I be the one that chooses me? How can I be the one that protects me? I think it's so easy for us all to look to external things like friends and family, which isn't necessarily wrong, but what a powerful step then to be able to be that for ourselves. Then no matter what's going on, we have ourselves. And everyone else can be like a cherry on top or an additional support, but we're fully supported by ourselves. And feels like that was a message you just got. Like you've really done a lot of work and you are so protected and supported by you.
Yeah, thank you. And I so agree. It's like we really only have ourselves in this world. So it's kind of morbid, but we come in alone and we leave alone. And the more we are good with ourselves, just like you said, everything else is a cherry on top. And there isn't this desperate holding of the reins to try to control everything when you're in such a regulated state within self-love. And it's been so powerful in 2023 and 2024. I mean, losing my mom in 2021 was a huge catalyst for this jump in growth as well, because I leaned on her a lot and I would always ask her opinion about things. And I've just never had to be more self-reliant than I am now. And there's such freedom and so many gifts. And I know the hummingbird community that's listening are probably on similar journeys or have been on similar journeys. And so I hope my story resonates with you guys as well. It's like, just keep going, because when you say yes to your personal power, it's like those pillars of self-worth and personal power that I talk about, which is self-worth, self-confidence, respect, and follow through. And when you say yes to those things, you will just build your most powerful, powerful life. The other thing I want to talk about briefly about my trip, I mean, there was so much to say and it was just so amazing. Like, I have a Sagittarius stellium and I am just my happiest self when I am traveling. But the other cool thing, I love history, and I'm the type of person that when I'm on a trip to another country, I want to take tours. I want to see what the ancient people were doing. I want to know what every single building is. I want to know what happened in the city. And so we were on a tour in Rome, which I just love Rome. I feel like I have past life connections there, because when I was there in 2015, I felt the same thing I felt this year, which is just this electric feeling and like so much excitement. And so everywhere we toured, the beautiful churches, which by the way, I sat in the power in the old churches on my trip and it was so beautiful. So if you live in a place that has old churches, no matter what your religion is, it's still a place of worship and hope. And it's not necessarily what the institution brings to the space, it's what the people do. And sitting in it and with the intention to connect with spirit is really beautiful, in my opinion. Just sitting in silence is so beautiful. And so we were going around all these old churches and you would hear this took 800 years to build. This took 400 years to build. Multiple people died trying to build this. The Colosseum was built with slave labor and multiple slaves would die. And you just hear things like that. So we were in Vatican City, which the energy there is so wild. And I was talking with our tour guide and she ended up being so cool. I was like, were you meant to be my tour guide or what? She's like, I'm a Scorpio too. And I'm a double Pisces and I'm psychic. And she said everybody in Italy loves astrology because the ancient Romans were so into astrology. It's like a cultural thing. So I was like, that is so cool. And she's like, most Americans, when I ask them, don't even know their sign. I was like, girl, you're with the right person. So she and I were like having this philosophical chat on our own. And I was telling her that the message that I got is that these beautiful, beautiful buildings that were works of art that you see all over Europe are basically metaphors for how slow it takes human consciousness to evolve. And so these beautiful work of art buildings, that it took death, it took grueling work, it took so many hundreds of years, but look at where it got in the end. And that's what we have to remember about the evolution of consciousness. It's going to speed up a little bit because Pluto's in Aquarius and we're coming more firmly into the age of Aquarius, but it's slow. And that can be so frustrating, like for the architect that has the vision and that's ready for it to be built and can see the plans. And I think that's how a lot of people who are spiritually awake feel, like ready to be the architect and the visionary for what wants to come next. But the actual implementation to create such beautiful, long-lasting structures on planet Earth takes time, it takes sacrifice, and it takes some difficulty. And those buildings everywhere gave me hope because it showed how beautiful things can be when humans put in the time and the effort and the consistency. And I just really feel like the consciousness we're creating on Earth is perfectly mirrored by that.
Yeah, I never thought about it like that, but that's so true. Anything really good takes some time. And I think it can be really tempting to want to just jump ahead. And like, of course, because in so many ways, we're talking about trying to create like peace on earth and trying to heal these wounds and come together and be better to the planet. And for those of us on that journey, it's, oh, that needs to happen right now. But I think trusting that things take time and that because they take time, it doesn't mean it isn't happening. I think that can feel like I'm not seeing the results now, so it's not happening. And I even feel that way in my journey as an artist. It can feel like I'm not where I want to be. So that means I'm not making progress. But things are a spiral. They're not a circle. Our growth, our consciousness, evolution, our progress as people and whatever we're doing, often we come back around to those same lessons, but not in the same exact place, in that spiraling energy of a new place. And yeah, I think giving ourselves that grace and patience as we move into this new consciousness and as more and more people find it and as that shapes and changes the experience of humanity.
Absolutely. And what I just got as you were talking too is that when you look at a lot of these like masterpiece churches and duomos and cathedrals, you see stonework from different time periods all integrated because they can't be all built at once. And it just shows how each generation builds upon what the previous generation brought in. And so even the steps that we're taking forward in this generation of consciousness to heal, to do our inner child work, the reparenting work, like we are putting bricks down and stones down and designs. We might not see the bigger picture that the architects that say our angels and guides see, but we're saying yes to what needs to be foundationally built in front of us so that generations coming can add their turret, can add their balcony, can add their wing to the castle or the building. And I just think that the more I think about this comparison that I got as a download in Vatican City, the more it makes sense and just fills me with hope because humanity has the potential to build such beauty on earth. It just takes time and we can't be distraught by the setbacks or the tragedy or the people who don't see the vision, because the people that don't see the vision, it doesn't even really matter if they don't see the vision because they're still putting bricks down and they don't see how.
Yes. And I think another thing that brought up too is that the building doesn't get made without all of our collective energy and input. all those different layers of the architecture. It's like, especially when you're a go-getter, it's like you can feel like I'm going to do it all myself. And like you were saying, like the generations before us created layers that we now stand upon and are able to expand upon. So knowing that it's this like huge collaboration of all of us together, adding our particular bricks, and that allows then for future generations to add their bricks. Like we are doing this together. And I think that can feel comforting and exciting and take the burden off of how do I fix all this at once?
Yeah, it's like just keep doing your best and showing up authentically and sharing your gifts and being a creator in this world. And that is adding to this generation or your generation's foundation to the building. And the buildings just strike a sense of awe. People travel from all over the world and go through such effort and time and money to see these things. And there's just this undeniable magic to what happens when humanity commits to such a vision. So it gave me a lot of hope for the future. And I just wanted to share that download because I thought it was pretty cool when it came through.
Yeah, for sure. And one more thing you said that I love too, that those buildings, like when I visited Europe, I had this feeling of, man, why don't we make buildings like this anymore? These are so beautiful. And now we're just making these like boxes or like rectangles. And I think that is something I'm really trying to take into my life this year of everything you do can be creative. Everything you do can be art. The way that you create your space at home, the way you have a conversation, the way you interact with strangers, what you choose to wear. We can create art. We can make little boxes everywhere, or we can make these like beautiful ornate buildings in, metaphorically in all the aspects of our life. And I think I really want to choose to make beautiful ornate architecture in all the little places in my life because it's joyful and it brings joy to other people that experience it too.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I just feel like we've lost the forest for the trees. It's like we're in this place where it's like, how efficient can this be? How fast can this be? How much money can I make? But we've lost the bigger vision of our dreams and how we want to feel and the point of life. And I think that as the nodes, by the time this comes out, the nodes will have already moved into Pisces and Virgo. And I think that's a part of the lesson of them is like reconnecting to our dreams, sort of being immersed into this main character, romantic energy, falling in love with life again. And I know it can be so hard when you feel into survival mode and you feel like you can't get out of survival mode, but even just the micro moments, how you can add more romance and magic and passion and main character energy to your life. I think that that's where we're being called with the North Node in Pisces. And I think that it was really interesting, especially in Italy. I was surprised. I looked up the birth chart of Italy. It's actually a Gemini, but I would have thought it was a Taurus because they know how to live life through the senses, like luxury and beauty and art and passion. And I feel like Italy helped me fall back in love with life on a level. So shout out to Italy.
Yes, agreed. The food is so good. It's like when you eat food in Italy, you're like, oh, I've never eaten food until now.
I
It's
know.
so
It
good.
was so good. It was such a beautiful trip.
Well, before we jump into the listener stories and questions, we have reached 166 5-star reviews on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. Truly, thank you so much, you guys. Like your messages and your feedback and sharing the pod, like it's just so wonderful. And by giving us 5 stars and sharing it, it means that we can continue to do this and reach more people. So you've done such a beautiful service to us in the community by doing that. And now I've got my little bowl of names. And now I'm going to pick a name. And this person will get a reading with Taylor. Mandy Chung.
Congratulations, Mandy. I can't wait to connect with you.
Yes, we love Mandy. She's a big supporter. She actually composed the Magic Hour music.
Yes, exactly. She's the composer for Magic Hour. She shared us on her stories and rated everywhere and got 3 entries. And it's just so magical that she's who got picked.
Yay. I know she will be so, so thrilled.
I cannot wait to connect. Thank you, Mandy, for being the lyrical enchantress on this podcast and blessing people with your voice. And I just can't wait to connect to your birth chart and your ancestors in our time together.
Okay, should we get into the stories and questions?
I can't wait.
Okay, great. You guys, there are so many to choose from. So just know that if you don't hear your question or story today, that doesn't mean that we didn't pick it. There's just so many amazing ones, and we're just working our way through the list. So please continue to send in contact@magichourpod.com. Send your 5-star reviews because we will do another giveaway when we hit 222 5-star reviews on both Apple and Spotify. So continue to do that. Continue to send us your listener questions and stories. This is a question and story from Alexa. Hi, Taylor and Claire. Firstly, I want to say thank you so much for the knowledge, stories, and love you share on the pod. I find myself feeling enlightened after each episode and especially appreciate the transparency and vulnerability around grief, as I lost my dad 1 year ago to cancer. I feel a little less alone in this journey because of you and the guests you bring on. Also, fun fact, I believe Claire and I share the same big three: Aquarius, Sun, Pisces, Moon, Leo, Rising. Oh my God, Alexa, we do.
Twins.
Twins. I love it. Okay. My email is both a question and a story. When I was younger, I used to see spirits and had what I now believe to be clairsentience, which lessened as I got older. After I lost my dad, I began to wonder if I could tap into that energy again. I've had some experiences here and there with signs and synchronicities. The other night, I heard someone whisper my name in my ear. I swore it sounded like my dad, but walked back out of the room to see if it was my husband. No one was there. I said, "Dad," and moments later, the touch lamp in our bedroom went up to the next level of brightness. I felt such a rush and believed this was my dad, especially since his 1-year death anniversary was exactly 1 month prior. However, I can't help but gaslight myself into thinking I am imagining things or stretching things. Do you have any advice on how to gain confidence in believing in these experiences? Or how can I strengthen my abilities? Any input is very welcomed and appreciated. With much love, Alexa.
Alexa, thank you so much for this. And I'm so sorry to hear about your dad. It's so difficult, especially, there's no timeline on grief, but those first 2 years are really, really tough in my experience. So I'm just sending you so, so much love. And I'm so touched by your story. It gave me chills. It made me tear up a little bit. That's exactly the way our past loved ones work. Like the story I told at the beginning of the episode about losing my ring. It's like, it's not just about losing my ring. It's the astrology lining up, New Year's Eve, the year of the snake. They pile on so many synchronicities in one thing. So it's like his death date anniversary was a month before. The lamp went up. You heard his name. You were really missing him and he was on your mind. There's just all of these layers that I just love so much about this. I want to touch on a couple different things. One is that it seems like clairaudience, psychic hearing, might be one of your main clairs. And as one of my mediumship mentors taught me, so clairaudience is my least developed clair. Like even when I get people's names or sentences, it's more like I know them than hear them. So when clairaudience comes online for me, it's actually really exciting because it's not usual. And so I was speaking to my mentor about clairaudience because I heard something when I was sitting in the power one time. And my mentor said, there's so much more information you can get from even one word when it comes to clairaudience if you just zoom in. What was the volume? What was the tone? Did they seem happy? Did they seem energized? Did they seem quiet? Did they seem reserved? Did they seem shy? What age did the voice seem? Were they talking to someone else? How many voices were there? It's like there's so much information in just a quick thing. And for you, you heard your dad's voice. So it's not like it was just a disembodied voice. You heard a voice that sounded like your dad's. And so I would invite you to, if you can remember it, try to meditate on, did he sound calm? How close or far away did he sound? There might be so much more information that you could get from just that flash of hearing than you even recognize. The second thing I want to say is, as a part of this society that is ruled by materialism and does not place importance on the immaterial world, it is so normal because we have internalized the inquisitor to doubt ourselves, to gaslight ourselves, to talk ourselves out of our birthright of spiritual connection. And so that is why what I recommend everybody to do is to start what I call a miracle journal, which is where every single time that you experience a synchronicity, every single time you in your own divining practice get something right or something lines up or you feel supported, every single time something aligns in a spiritual way that makes you feel protected, loved, and guided, write it down. Even if you get a reading from someone and it really resonates and you feel lit up after that, write it down. The energy of that higher consciousness lives in your words, and writing it down not only integrates it into your heart space and your psyche, but it also gives you a place to come back and have tangible connections to every single time that you felt magic. Even me, as a professional intuitive psychic medium and astrologer, it probably took me 8 years to not doubt myself, second guess myself, even as I'm working professionally. It was really up until like last year or the year before that before every session, I wouldn't be like, what if nothing comes through? Am I connected? Can I really do this? That voice is not a yardstick of your spiritual capacity or skill set. It's simply a natural protection mechanism because we are so scared to trust in the unknown when we have never been taught to do that. And so I know you also said that you were really tapped in as a kid and that you want to reconnect. And that's also so common. I even talk about it in my Healing the Witch Wound workshop, the trajectory of the modern witch's journey. It's like we come in as this wild witchling of childhood that's so connected. And then we go through the forgetting and then the call and the remembering. And the remembering leads to the wise one. But all of those archetypes already live within us and are ready to be accessed at every single time. And each phase learns from the next. So that remembering, that reconnection, and that strengthening of your psychic senses, it's not an accident that you are being called to that now. I even feel like sometimes the death of a parent pushes us to remember and to wake up. And I know that certainly happened with my mom's passing. It pushed me into my mediumship journey. And every single person that I met at Arthur Findlay College when I was there has lost somebody. And more often than not, it's that losing somebody that reminds us of our spiritual gifts and to connect with people who are just on the other side. So I think that you are in a ripe moment for your own development. So just keep going and keep writing everything down. And instead of believing the thoughts that are trying to gaslight you, listen to them. And I would ask myself, what's the earliest age I can remember gaslighting myself? What's the youngest I can remember society telling me that I need to stop talking about these types of things or seeing ghosts or spirits? Start to get in touch with your inner child, because if you're gaslighting yourself about this, you'll be gaslighting yourselves about other things that have to do with your gifts and your magic and your intuition, your connection. So how we do one thing is kind of how we do everything, I've come to learn. So I think this is also a ripe opportunity for you to get into some deeper rewiring inner child work when it comes to healing the witch wound as well.
Yes. That's so true. I love the miracle journal idea because it is so true that we'll tally all the times we don't feel connected and then forget all the times that we do. And then in a moment where we need to feel connected, we'll forget all the moments that we did and that we asked for a sign and saw it or felt that connection and knew intuitively that that is what we were feeling. So I love that. And I think it's something I experienced too, of this like skepticism and fear. It's funny, I was mulling over a decision and I was like, oh, I really need some guidance. So I asked my angels to send me a sign of butterflies. And the next morning I opened my phone and went onto Instagram, and the first post I saw was of a butterfly. And it was amazing how quickly my brain was like, yeah, but she always posts butterflies. So was that really for me? Maybe could you send me another sign of butterflies just to confirm? And then I saw more butterflies and I was like, yeah, but, and on I went with it. I just bring that up because you could reframe it and say, what if you're gaslighting yourself to not believe? What if the gaslighting is actually saying, oh, that couldn't possibly be true, and I was probably making that up, versus thinking that you're gaslighting yourself into being like, oh, I think I really saw a sign. I really heard my dad. Like, choose the other. Like, what if I just chose to believe that when I see the sign, it is a sign, and that when I feel the connection, it is the connection, and that's why I feel it, instead of choosing to doubt it to protect myself? Because what's the worst that happens if we believe it? our world isn't going to unravel if we decide that magic is real and that we are connected. If anything, it will open up to all these beautiful possibilities. We just need to have the bravery to step through the door.
Absolutely. And I think a healthy dose of skepticism isn't a bad thing. I think that that's a good thing. And I think evidence is really important in this work because there can be people that are predatory in the space. And I think that has us naturally with our guard up. But just like you said, Claire, like, why not believe that you're supported? Why not believe in the signs? And I think that even I feel like intuitively some journaling work might be really good to just go a little bit deeper. And I think that you might be getting more psychic information than you actually realize. And I just invite you to zoom in, like I said, on instead of looking to what's the next thing, like just when you hear something or when a song comes on, pay attention. If clairaudience is your main clair, your guides will communicate a lot through song lyrics that pop into your head. Sit with those and zoom in on them and see what your immediate associations are. And again, I always say the best recipe for angelic connection and this work overall is playful curiosity is the right vibration to enter into this with, because there's no failing. It's just a beautiful exploration of what has been hidden, purposely erased, and lost throughout time. That truly is our birthright.
I love that. Playful curiosity. How can we have that with everything in our life? Okay, shall we jump into another?
Let's.
Okay. A lot of you have been writing in, and they're kind of like a hybrid, a story and a question, which is amazing and perfect. So I love it. This is a question from Jasmine. Dear Taylor and Claire, my name is Jasmine. Thank you both for the Magic Hour. It's such a refreshing and lovely podcast that warms my spirit. And I left you all a great rating. Thank you. Your calm voices and kindness shine through with each episode. I especially love the sitting with spirit time. One time, a spirit that came through had a lot of similarities with my mother. A mother energy, past of cancer or illness, something to do with the stomach, etc. I don't recall all of the exact words, but I remember it resonated. My mom passed in March 2024, and life has been an emotional roller coaster ever since. I have days I get by and I'm relatively okay. I have other days where I sob in my car. The holidays are difficult, and I am dreading her first death anniversary in 2025. My question is that recently I've had a terrible eczema outbreak and severe period pains tied to fibroids. I'm getting medical attention, but both of these issues were issues I dealt with in the past over a year or more ago that are now rearing their head again. It's terrible because before my mom was here to comfort me and now she isn't. I'm also applying to grad school, fingers crossed, and trying to move life forward, but feel like so much is coming up from the past. I want to have a slow-paced grief, so I'm not rushing my healing, but I also don't want to drown in my sorrows or prevent happiness. This is an insanely hard balance. Any advice for when it feels like we simply can't keep up with life? Too much to do, too many expectations, never enough time, and our body acting against us? Jasmine.
Jasmine, I am so sorry. This seems like a theme of the episode is parents who have passed recently, and I'm sending so much love. You are in the first year, which means just do what you need to do to survive. Do not worry about a bigger plan or the bigger picture or what you should be doing. Just take care of yourself. Take care of yourself through the ebbs and flows. The first year is basically relearning who you are without your mom. And that's devastating. And I've been there, and I am just sending you so much love. Let's just take a moment for both Alexa and Jasmine and just send them some light from the hummingbird community and just send them healing and love. Beautiful. And so, as I said, the first year is really just a survival mode. Something that helped me in the first year, because I used to have these like long phone calls with my mom literally every day. There was no stone we left unturned. We talked about everything. And I started listening to audiobooks when I would have been speaking to her. And maybe people would overanalyze that and be like, well, you should just be feeling the grief and you should leave that space open and you shouldn't always be occupied. But that's what I needed to survive. So throw out the classic healing advice that people give that are not in their first year of grief and just focus on what you need to survive, because it really is that intense. I also do want to speak from personal experience that for me, I would also dread the 1 year passing anniversary, her first birthday. Like, I would have these big meltdowns before those dates. And those dates really force us to confront our grief and to come back to the reality of them not being here on the physical plane with us. And what I found, and I still find, is that every single lead up is worse than the day itself. The day itself is usually like actually a very special portal to feel close to them and to honor them. And I found that I could go so fast in my day to try to avoid feeling any feelings that I couldn't escape them on those days. So I think just be kind to yourself on the lead up, because when the actual day comes, it might be a beautiful opportunity for you to honor her. Something I like to do is leave the day open if possible and just say, Mom, like, where do you want to go? And just go wherever I feel led and spend the day with her that way. Something I'm also doing, because I live on a lake, is every year I put one rose in the water for her and pour my love into it. And every year I add another one. So this year, on the 3 year anniversary, I put 3 roses into the lake. There's creative things you can do. You can build an altar to her. You can do something to celebrate her, whatever feels right, but just take care of yourself. The second thing is, after my mom passed, I had the worst period pains that I have ever had in my life. And grief causes a huge amount of stress on the physical body. Like, I had just gotten to a place in my PCOS journey where I was no longer really getting cramps. I was in a much better place, and then it completely set me back. And so the body is speaking to you, and it is an uproar, and it's grief is just so dysregulating and inflammatory. So know that that will not last forever. This isn't just like your new body and your new normal. It's like part of the survival mode of such intense grief. So just do whatever you need to do to support yourself. Something that really helped me was Osea Malibu has this vagus nerve bath oil, and I would take baths with that bath oil, and it would calm my vagus nerve and it would regulate my nervous system. I took a lot of baths in my first year and a half. Actually, I have a list on my phone I want to pull up really fast because I wrote notes about everything I did in that first year that helped me. Okay. So these are just some suggestions for anybody going through a grieving journey. It can be as intense as Jasmine, Alexa, me losing a parent. It can be grieving a relationship. It can be grieving a dream, whatever you're grieving. The grief recovery method, it's a little purple workbook. You can work through it with a specialist, a person that's trained in the method. You can probably find them online. Literally saved my life, because my mom's passing left me with so much rage, like not even anger, full on rage. And I had just gotten married to my husband. I got married, I think, 8 months after she passed. And I was so angry, and I couldn't come into my new chapter, my new marriage as this version of self. I had to really commit to my grief work and my healing journey. And that grief recovery method was just so instrumental. So I cannot recommend it enough. I also really worked on loving so deeply the version of self that grief turned me into, because who we are when we're in deep grief is a completely different version of self than when we're feeling supported and loved by the universe. And so loving yourself when you're in your grief, loving yourself through the eczema, the fibroids, everything that's coming up for you, is building such self-trust with yourself that will serve you in such a deep foundational way when you're out of the depths of your grief journey. And it truly contributed to me having the strength to, quote unquote, ace other lessons that the universe was sending my way with other people, because I so had my back and loved myself when I couldn't even lift up my head because I was grieving so hard. I also have to say that it's important to acknowledge our heartbreak. I think sometimes we're expected to just be okay and to move forward. And a big lesson for me was that my inner child didn't give an F about what societal expectations were. She wanted me to cry with her because it was extremely sad. And her worst nightmare came true when I lost my mom. And so I think acknowledging the heartbreak is really important, because we try so hard to stay busy and productive and move forward and be our best self. And it's important to just let yourself be okay acknowledging that it's not okay. Working with a therapist, observing my numbing agents was a big one. So this doesn't necessarily even have to mean taking them away. It just means observing them. Like for me, work was my biggest one. I dove into work head first. Angels and Amethyst really took off right after my mom passed, and I went on TBM, To Be Magnetic Expanded podcast. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people wanted to work with me. I was just like as busy as possible with everybody else's stuff, so I didn't have to think about my own. Work was my biggest numbing agent. And so I think just observing that, because when you're in a place where you're ready for more spaciousness and connection and you're out of survival mode, you'll have to detangle your relationship with some of those numbing agents. Like I said, if they're working for you now to get you through survival mode, please use them because they're in your toolbox, but just observe them. I also, in the body category, I really leaned into lymphatic drainage when I could, because I felt like there was just all of this inflammation and swelling and grief. And I just tried to drain and release and bathe and do things like that as much as I could. I also used adrenal support supplements. I like Symbiotica's and immune system support as well. And then I know there's a tea company that I really like too. We'll link it on the show notes, but she has an adrenal supplement. So crying and grief and like that, those deep body racking sobs are such a drain on our adrenals. And it's a big reason that our health like kind of suffers as well, is because we're so depleted from the intensity of feeling the feelings. So it's really important to support our physical body through grief as well. It's like when you get in a really big fight with someone and you feel hungover the next day, like that is that sort of adrenal fatigue. So supporting the physical body, like I said, is so important. I also found that reduced screen time is important. Like it's okay to listen to a podcast. And I'm not just saying that because I host one. It's okay to listen to audiobooks, things like that. But for me, overstimulation and screen time when my body was already so depleted was just a little much. Walking in nature, anything like that. And I understand silence and spaciousness can feel so unsafe when you're in grief. Again, fill it with what you need to, whether it's a conversation with a friend or listening to something, whatever, but just limiting screen time. And then so that was mind and body. And on a soul level, feeling your feelings, making space to cry, loving yourself enough to be okay, not being okay, going slowly, getting into nature, creating sacred space for your mom to come through or for whatever person on the other side to come through. Connecting with your angels and guides every day. Like sometimes in our deepest grief, that opens and cracks us up to such deep potential for spiritual connection and love with our angels and guides. And if you don't already have a practice in that way, I really highly recommend it. And the last thing I said is choosing to live my best life as a love letter to her. And that was a big breakthrough that I had, is that sometimes when we're in the depth of our grief, there's too much guilt to be happy. How could I be happy without her here? That's an insult to her memory. And it was a big breakthrough for me when I realized, no, that's not true. Living my best life, letting her best qualities shine through me in the world is truly a living love letter to her on the other side. So it's really interesting because, on a little bit of a side note, I have been working, and if you listen to the December listener questions, I was talking about how burnt out I was and how my current workload, or my workload back then, was a trauma response to losing my mom, and I stayed so busy. And so I've been creating more spaciousness going into 2025. And what's so interesting is that that did not feel safe to my nervous system. As soon as I slowed down, as soon as I started taking less clients, as soon as I left more space on my plate for what wanted to come in, I started getting anxious. I had physical anxiety in my heart. And I was like, what is this? It felt like I had just taken a bunch of caffeine. And so I also feel like when you're out of survival mode and now this is speaking to everybody who's on different trajectories in their grief journey, it might take a little bit of time to teach your nervous system that it's safe to sit in spaciousness and to not always be in like any numbing behavior that you're doing for the grief. It's going to be a second to teach yourself that it's safe not to do it. And so that's also a sign for people who are in different places in their grieving journey that If you have some anxiousness coming up, if it feels uncomfortable and you don't know why, and you're taking away some of the old numbing agents, that might be why. Don't take that as a back step on your healing journey. Take it as a good sign that you're just sitting with your nervous system and your inner child, and you're regulating yourself to see that you can fill this new space. That is an important lesson. And I actually have here lessons that I've learned post my mom's passing. Grief affects the body as much as the mind and soul, and it's okay to be tired or have way less capacity for other people's energy. And here's the thing about grief as well, is that you think, for example, in the holidays season, which I know we're past now, but we're still in the dark part of the year. So this is a time where grief can still surface and come up, and it's a new year without this person or this thing or this place or this memory or this dream. And you don't have to be the version of yourself that you were before the grief. You do not have to do the same things. You do not have to please other people. Just showing up for your level of capacity is so important. Don't measure your yardstick of productivity based on the stories of who you were before the grief. And as you go down the grief journey, the things that felt impossible or like a betrayal to the person you lost will become a love letter to their memory, as I was saying. And it's actually really interesting because I remember I was in London with my husband, and it was about 2 years, a little over 2 years after she passed. And I had my first day in that 2 years where I did not think about the sadness at all. And that made me cry and sad because I was like, oh my gosh, I went all day without remembering how sad I am. And that was a big turning point in my grief as well. I would have never thought that was possible when it started. So there will come a time, no matter how much time it is, where you go a whole day without remembering how devastated and heartbroken you are. And you actually fall back in love with life. And I want you to know, no matter where you are on your grief journey, that that is coming, that is coming, and it will not be like this forever. And what you'll need on your grief journey will vary day to day, month to month, moment to moment, year to year. So don't get married to doing one thing one way. Just use this as an intimate journey and self-discovery and showing up for yourself and learning yourself in an even more vulnerable way. And lastly, sometimes your inner child just needs you to cry with them. So that's a lot of the takeaways that I've had from my grief journey. I really hope it helps you, Jasmine. The mind-body connection is so deep. And I know in the episode we had with Julie Ryan, I talk about that a lot, about how my period pain was really tied to emotional pain, and everything is so interconnected. So when we are healing, we cannot heal if we do not include mind, body, soul. And when one element of that trifecta gets hurt, it affects all of the other faculties. So just take care of yourself.
First of all, thank you for all of that, Taylor. That was amazing. And I've often thought about how I wanted us to talk about grief on the podcast. Maybe we can even do another episode where we really dive into it again, because, you know, it's such a big thing that we're all grappling with in different ways at different moments in our life. And it can be so overwhelming. And just observing you and your journey with it has been really inspiring to see that you've been moving through it in a very healthy way. And it doesn't mean that it hasn't been brutal and difficult, but I think you've shown me a way through. And so I know that that will be really helpful to so many people.
Thank you. And I have to say, I've never loved myself more. Sometimes when we go through grief, the loss of that person in our life kind of forces us to transform. When our loved one dies, we die too and are reborn. And it has made me more powerful, realize that I had my own back in such a profound way that I'm not saying it couldn't be possible if she hadn't passed, but one of the silver linings for me was my acceptance of the invitation to love myself fully, and how that has created such a strong foundation in every other relationship and area of my life.
Yeah. And that's something I was thinking about as you were talking, and something I've been confronting in my life, because I'm on my own grief journey, not because of a death, but because of a relationship that ended that, you know, has been very sad for me. And I've noticed that for myself and other people in my life who are going through hard things, that the hard experience has opened me up to healing. and to stepping forward into this healing journey. And one aspect of the healing journey is healing the wound that this loss created. But it also has opened me to deeper healing that was things that were already a part of me that I wasn't fully like looking at and acknowledging, that have now reared their head in the face of this loss. And so it's been like a beautiful silver lining, like you said, to take a step into a healing journey for ourselves. And I feel like hard experiences do that for us. Like even what you talked about, falling in love with your life, that is this beautiful invitation that this tragic experience gave you. And so I think we don't need to get too ahead of ourselves and, okay, so I'm bettering myself because this has been hard. But I think that's just like innately something that happens when we are confronted with a really hard experience, is that it opens us up to deeper healing. And we usually emerge on the other side of it a stronger, more empowered, tuned in version of self. And I really have observed that with you and your journey with it. And that is, like you said, such an honoring of your mother and her legacy, that you are living such a beautiful, bold, empowered, loving life. Like her loss allowed you to step even more fully into that version of self. And so I think that can be like a really beautiful invitation that these difficult things can give us.
Yeah. Thank you, Claire. I really appreciate that. And I feel like it's also really powerful when you've lost a parent, no matter what your relationship was to them, whether it was a best friend relationship, whether it was a strained relationship, you have gained a powerful angel on the other side. And I also, my mom has been with me like every step of the journey since she's passed. And that's been another silver lining, is just this sense of such peace and trust and knowing her support on the other side too.
Yeah. And I mean, something I've observed with you and your journey of mediumship is that we have relationships with our soul family in many ways and through many realms and dimensions. And while nothing replaces the human experience of our relationships, when a loved one passes on, we get a new dynamic with them, and they can be with us in a different way. Like they can be with us all the time in a way that on this like plane distance created a barrier. You know, of course, that doesn't replace what it is to be physically near someone, but I think it is another adventure that the two of you get to go on as this dynamic shifts and the way that you connect shifts then.
Absolutely. Our relationship continues on in a new form. And before we transition to sitting with spirit, I'll tell my own little listener story. So, the last little story from the trip. So, we were in Rome, and the last time I was in Rome was with my mom, and it made me pretty emotional. And that's the other thing about grief. It's like sometimes it just sneaks up on you, and out of nowhere, I'm just crying at the frickin' famous Trevi Fountain. That day, we got lunch and we had a tour guide that was taking us around. And we told the tour guide, just take us anywhere you think is good for lunch. And he took us to a place that was called Gordy. And it was called Gordy with a wine bottle. There was like an I in it, but the wine bottle was an I. So if you took the wine bottle out, it was just Gordy. And my mom's name was Gordy. Her name was Gordona, and people called her Gordy. So we sit down, and if you know, my mom signed me as white butterflies, and there's like a little flea market outside, and we're outside. And in the stall closest to me is a suitcase with a white butterfly on it. And the password for the Wi-Fi at the restaurant was Gordy 2021, and she passed in 2021. And it was the day that I was crying because I missed her, and I was crying at the fountain. I was emotional all day. And side note, my father-in-law's sign is a monarch, and the suitcase had a monarch and a white butterfly, and we knew that they were both with us on the trip. So that night, I had a visitation dream from her, and I was in my old Ojai house where I obviously grew up with my parents. And I was with my dad, me, my grandma, and my aunt. We were all in the foyer. And my mom was standing right in the middle of us, but I was the only one that could see her. And she was like, I'm always here. I'm always here. Tell your dad I hear him when he talks to me. I'm always here. And it was so powerful. And she was just so with me on that trip. She sent so many signs. And so that shows I still have a relationship with my mom. Her consciousness lives on. And if you guys knew the extent of the evidence that comes through in my readings with people that I could not have known. There is no freaking way possible that we die with physical death. We go back to oneness. We go back to everything that is without a body, but we are still there. And your loved ones on the other side will prove that to you time and time again.
That is such a magical story. I hope you wrote that in your miracle journal, because that was a miracle on top of a miracle on top of a miracle. That was amazing. It's just such a comfort to know that they're there still supporting. And I'm sure she could feel that you were missing her. And so she found all these ways to show her love and support for you. It's just so magical.
So magical. And it's so good to be back. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the sun is setting and I'm in darkness. So let's transition to sitting with spirit. Welcome back to Sitting with Spirit, my loves, the part of the podcast where I sit with our angels, our guides, our loved ones in spirit, and give the messages for the collective. Please take what resonates and leave the rest, of course. And if you know anybody who could benefit from these messages, please share them. And thank you for being a rainbow bridge for spirit in that way. There is just so much to say because I know that this episode comes out January 29th, which is when we launch season 2 of Magic Hour, which is the Aquarius new moon. And as an intuitive astrologer, I get knowings about things when it comes to astrology, just like I do in my psychic mediumship work or angelic intuitive work. And something that has been a knowing for me is that when we go through the zodiac sign mansion that Pluto is in, it is a time that is emphasizing where we are growing, transforming, standing in our power, and shedding. And so I've witnessed that the holidays, while Pluto was in the last few degrees of Capricorn, that Capricorn season has been really like deeply transformative shadow work periods for me. And now Pluto has moved into Aquarius. And the themes of Pluto in Aquarius are how can we be more authentic and original to ourselves instead of trying to be what we think we should be for everyone else? How can we embrace change? Aquarius is the change maker and it happens quick. And as we move through Pluto and Aquarius, we'll have a lot of big change on the collective level and the individual level. And change, which is the only constant, as they say, can feel so dysregulating to our nervous system. And we can hate change and we can try to hold the reins of control. And I think Pluto in Aquarius is going to be a big, big time for lessons around embracing change, flowing with change, moving with change. And so another place that Pluto in Aquarius is transforming is friendships and community. When we are our authentic, original, ingenious selves, then we attract the right friendships and community that resonate with us because we're in our authentic expression. And I think as we continue to grow and change and transform, our friendships and community is going to start to grow and change and transform. And some relationships might not feel aligned. And lastly, Pluto in Aquarius, well, not really lastly, but the last of my bullet points, because there's endless manifestations of Pluto in Aquarius. But the last of my bullet point is a pathway for spiritual downloads and higher consciousness. Aquarius is the water bearer. It brings higher consciousness to humanity and helps us evolve into what we're here to become. Often those with Aquarius heavy placements feel like the black sheep in some area of their life, whether it's their family, whether it's community in some way. There's always this feeling of I'm a little bit misunderstood, and it's because you're here to push consciousness forward. And humanity can be so slow, as we were talking about in the episode with the metaphor to these beautiful buildings that take forever to construct. And so with the new moon in Aquarius and with us currently being in Aquarius season, this is a powerful moment to focus on these themes. Our intuition is sharpening. We're being asked to shed outdated layers of self that are just no longer authentic. And it's this moment where there might be some tests and some lessons, especially around all of the themes that I was just talking about. Check the house that Aquarius rules in your birth chart for more personalized information. And if you have any planets in Aquarius, this new moon in Aquarius is really a time to contemplate these themes. And if the intensity feels a little high, know that that is Pluto exerting its influence and asking us to continually do one of two things. Because when it comes to Pluto, it's always two things. One, let go or be dragged. And two, how can I be more powerful in this moment? So I ask you to consider these things when you're setting your new moon intentions and planting new seeds. I really feel like I get this image as I'm talking about sort of letting the wind blow you. You can't control the wind. You can't hold the wind. Let the wind blow you and go with it. It's sort of a similar vibe to not swimming upstream. I feel like as we're setting intentions, the more you can find detachment from outcomes, the easier this Pluto energy in Aquarius is going to be and the lighter it feels. Like truly detachment is the root of all freedom. And I think that that's a really important thing to consider. And even just observing in ourselves when it comes to our magical practice. Am I just doing this magical practice in order to get an outcome or hear something that I want to hear or feel like I'm absolved from the human experience if I do this? Is it rooted in fear, superstition, and control? Or how can I give my angels and guides an offering, a tribute of trust and release and lightness so that they may better work with me, so that I can better hear them? And that ties back to Pluto and Aquarius, because Aquarius is those lightning bolts of intuition and downloads. And when we find detachment and surrender to change, it's easier for those to come through. And so, in that vein, I was getting the message that I really needed to share that so many of us are working with new spirit guides. And I've been hinting at this since last year that there's been this changing of the guards. And 2020 through 2024 was really its own energetic block of a lot of similar lessons and growth and themes. 2025 and 2026 is like where we have been prepared to go. And I really do feel like we're in this moment now where we're starting to find new solutions to old problems, new ways to look forward, perhaps new decks or divining tools or things we used to not connect with are connecting with us now. Like I was saying before, our friendships and communities might start to shift. What we care about might start to shift. We might be initiating new projects or chapters or ventures. It's like everything is really feeling like, as I was tuning into this, I saw a sunrise. And a sunrise is my symbol for a light coming out after a dark chapter, after a lot of unknown, after a lot of difficulty, the light rising, indicating the light is coming back, a new chapter is coming. And so I do really feel like this sense of joy and love just from your angels hugging you, being like, we are here. And it just feels like they're communicating to you in new ways, and that your whole perspective on things is being asked to shift and change and grow, and that everything will start to feel new and perhaps full of potential. And you just might start looking at old problems in completely new ways. And I just also feel too like you might be ready to springboard to another level as you work with these new guides. And as I say that, that doesn't mean your old guides have abandoned you. It just is sort of this passing of the torch, and the guides that you've always worked with might still be there working with you in a different way. But I really do feel like there's almost from the spirit world, like they recognize the evolution of consciousness that's being called in on earth. And they're sort of like a changing of the guard there. It's a new way to guide humanity. So it just feels like a really powerful time, and stay open to flowing with your divining practices, flowing with what resonates and feels good, flowing with the version of self asking to emerge, because it might feel different or you might feel like you need to change. In the vein of authenticity and the Pluto and Aquarius stuff I was talking about, I saw my symbol for books, writing, journaling. And it feels like there's a message here about pioneering and sharing your authentic voice. And something that keeps coming through is there can be no authenticity, there can be no pioneering with a witch wound. And I think that Pluto in Aquarius is also asking us to heal the witch wound, because Pluto in Aquarius asks us to be original and authentic. And if you have a witch wound, that is what we have been deeply, deeply taught is not safe. We have to be solidly in the middle of the pack. We have to be agreeable. We have to be quote unquote good girls. We have to do what society tells us we have to do. And I think that this is where we are breaking free as well. Like, I'm going to share my voice with such bravery, authenticity, and originality. And I think that's so needed because we're all starting, especially with social media, to be like copies of each other and everybody's saying the same thing because it feels safe. I see that in the spiritual community all the time. Like one person shares a message that might be original and unique, and everybody says it in a different way, in their own way. And it just becomes this mimic echo chamber. But what we need more of is authentic, unique channels that aren't afraid to pioneer and share their voice. And so I think that this is a really beautiful moment for bravery, opening of the throat chakra, and going down pathways that really motivate you and excite you, and that your angels and guides are using curiosity to get your attention towards. It's like, don't be afraid to be an individual. And sometimes, and this comes along again, more Aquarian energy with like science and inventors and pushing the needle forward. It's like often they're not recognized in their time. Often they become famous or well-known or loved for their work posthumously. It's sort of like what we see coming out with the telepathy tapes, which we'll do a deep dive on in another episode, where it's like humanity isn't ready to hear that, but that doesn't mean that it's not the exact work that needs to come through right now. And so we need that initiated. Don't worry about what society is ready for. Worry about what your voice wants to say, what your gifts are, what excites you. I heard this quote, I think Andy Warhol said it, that art is what you can get away with. And I think that that is sort of in the vein of what I'm talking about here. So don't be afraid. Your voice matters. And this is a moment of deeper witch wound healing. So then I saw this really interesting image, and it was a pair of scales, and it was on the crown chakra. And the message that I got is that it's more important than ever to find balance in the mental realms, that there's a lot of sensationalism, that there's a lot of like shadow in the collective, that there's a lot of fear about the news and whatever's going on, and that in anything, you need to balance the scales, but especially with our thoughts. So, for how much time you're on social media, for how much time you're talking about what's wrong in the world, are you balancing that with times with loved ones, with researching good things that light you up and fill you with hope, with doing the things that support your mental health? Because I feel like a lot of people might be struggling with their mental health in this moment. And I feel like a lot of people are very scared of maybe what's happening collectively or where we're going. And I just get this really important message to balance the scales of your crown chakra, or else everything will seem doom and gloom and like we'll never find a way forward and like there's no hope. And that is not the case. So make sure that you continually ask yourself, okay, I've been really doom scrolling for a long time. How can I come back and balance the scales? And what was so interesting to me is I just got back from that trip to Europe. I was off my phone almost the entire time. I was just living my life in the moment. And I was like, oh my gosh, like the world goes on outside of my phone. Like when I'm home or I'm doom scrolling, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is wrong with the world. That's wrong with the world. Like we have mere months left with the climate clock. Everything is just really intense. And then you take a breath, you go outside of it, you balance the scales. That's not to say bury your head in the sand. I'm just saying balance the scales so that you can have the sustainability of being an agent for light in this world. So something really interesting came through, which was I don't even know if I'd call this a stone, but it was like a guide that wants to be worked with. And it was black pearl, which was so interesting. So black pearl, I looked it up, and it basically signifies protection, transformation, wisdom, and beauty from adversity. And it's tied in with what we were talking about in the episode, which is so interesting, of how, like a phoenix from the ashes, the things that we go through that are difficult transform us into the most beautiful, strong versions of self when we say yes to our healing journey. And I think black pearl is this reminder. It's similar to diamond, but it's like the divine feminine version of diamond, because pearl is very associated with the womb, mother energy, divine feminine. And so I do feel like working with pearl, whether a piece of jewelry or meditating with a pearl or just anything like that, feels very supportive as a reminder that through the darkest challenges, we can come through as such a beautiful, transformed, elevated version of self. So I found that to be really interesting. And now I'm going to move into the spirit person connection. Two people actually came through together, but the primary contact was a woman. And I was seeing the Cancer ribbon, and that means that She either had cancer or passed of cancer, but not necessarily has to pass of it, but there has to be a connection to cancer. And then I started feeling this pain in my mouth. I felt like my lips hurt, my mouth hurt. I couldn't move my mouth. So there was something with the mouth that was coming up. And then I also felt this kind of fogginess and heaviness in my mind. Like I couldn't really think, I couldn't really speak. And I was just having a difficult time processing things. I felt like this woman would have been in her 50s, and I felt like she would have been an athlete in college. She kept bringing me back to her 20s being like her peak and her prime. And I feel like there was something there about loving her 20s, being really carefree in her 20s, and that there was a lot of pride that she had. And so the name Michelle was coming up. So this could be her name or your name or someone close with her. Or sometimes when a name comes up, my guides are giving me like the first two letters. So it might even be an MI name. And then I also got this feeling from her. She liked to keep up with the boys. There was this competitiveness to her. And I feel like she would have had this tomboy energy. And I felt like she was with a man in spirit who might have had a more difficult relationship with her, but that there was healing on the other side. And so basically, as I was connecting with her, she was giving me this feeling of in my 20s, I was like on top of my game. I had no idea what the real world entailed. And that basically, when she got out into the real world more, I feel like there would have been a personality change. I feel like there would have been something about the glory days versus who she grew up to be. And there was something about this that felt very heavy and like she lost herself. And I feel like there was a connection to smoking with her. And I feel like there was a cynicism. And I feel like even her relationship to whoever this is for might have been a little bit tense or difficult as she grew older. And the feeling that I got is that she slowly lost herself in the struggles and the challenges of life. And her message is basically do not let pride keep you from living your most aligned life. Like, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to start again. Don't be afraid to be a quote unquote failure. Because I feel like she, again, had this sense of pride and this competitive energy. And I feel like when things were tough, she would turn inward instead of going outward for help. But the other part of her message was if you are in this moment where you feel like you're losing yourself, and upon further reflection, this really ties in with that Aquarius theme of authenticity. If you're in a moment where you feel like you've lost your light, you're not doing what you want to do, like you've deviated from your heart's path, this spirit's message is to reconnect. It's almost like when you lose your phone, it's like, well, where's the last time you can remember seeing it? And so, when's the last time you can remember feeling really lit up and like your authentic self? You just remember being like, oh, yeah, I forgot that this is what it feels like to be me. And this is what it feels like to be powerful and joyful and lit up and in my authentic energy. So, where's the last place you can remember that? Where's a memory, an event, a project you worked on, a person you hung out with? It can be anything. Start to gather the common denominators of when you felt your most lit up, happy self and start to build your pathway back to it. And conversely, start to look at what isn't working, what's making you feel less than, what's zapping you from your power, and start to be the architect of coming back to your heart's path, because that feels very important. Because the message she's giving me is that the longer you deviate from the path, the harder it is to find it again. So how can you find the path again? And for some, it might even be connecting with your inner child and what makes them really happy. And that's totally fine. But the more you get in the habit of being in wounds, victim consciousness, shame, any of those lower vibrational things, the harder it is to get back because you simply forget. It's not that the capacity isn't there, it's that you've forgotten who you really are. And this spirit's message is never do that, because not only do you suffer, the people that love you do too. So I found that to be a really beautiful message from her.
It's so interesting that you brought up authenticity, and it came up so many times through this, because that has been a major word that I've been trying to bring into this new year. And one of my best friends, it was his word for the new year. I've really been embracing it and looking at the ways in which, I'm a people pleaser, and I have long forsaken my needs for others' needs. And I'm noticing that the pain of doing that is no longer worth it. I think I feel that I'll be safe by sacrificing my authenticity to keep certain people in my life. But the joy that I feel being authentic, even if it means losing these people, is so much more worthwhile than that. And it truly does draw the people that are going to embrace your authenticity to you. And so I'm really trying to step into that. And I just love that it came up so much. And I loved this spirit's encouragement to get back to those things that made you feel lit up. And when was the last time you felt that and why? And really connect to those things, because those things are guides for us to our authenticity.
Yeah, absolutely. Our heart space is our GPS back to that place. And I think when we're around people that ask us to dim our light to be loved or accepted by them, we feel that in our heart. Our GPS is like, this doesn't feel right. And our head is like, but I'm going to play judge and jury over that knowing and convince myself that I have to do this for XYZ reason. And our head is just trying to keep us safe, but our heart knows the way. And so I think that is just so true. And also, as an Aquarius yourself, it's very interesting and synchronistic that authenticity has been coming up for you so much, because you're here to do that work so you can be a model of it for other people. That's the Aquarius journey, and Pluto in Aquarius has really activated that.
Yeah, I'm feeling it. I mean, I've always felt pretty authentic to a degree, but it's interesting to see the layers of it and where you're still, I was talking to a friend about people pleasing, and we were like, yeah, let's stop doing that. And then I immediately took an action afterwards that was people pleasing that I didn't even clock until later in the day when I felt icky about it and realized, oh my God, I did it again. It's like layers on layers that you peel back as you step more fully into this. But I do think it becomes easier as you go along, and the reward is so worth it. So I encourage everyone, join me on this path of authenticity this year. We got this.
With Pluto in Aquarius, micro moment to micro moment, ask yourself, is this authentic to me? And am I in my power? And it might surprise you what comes up and the things that we do on automatic pilot, because they have been deeply inherited and learned. And I mean, I'm on the journey with this too. And it's a powerful journey. And the new moon in Aquarius, which is this coming out on, is like the perfect time to start a new cycle of commitment to the authenticity, and maybe get a black pearl piece of jewelry for yourself. Like I was speaking about my promise ring, since black pearl is coming up and you can research yourself the deeper meanings of black pearl as well. That might be a supportive, I don't even know what pearls are. They're not gems. They're not crystals. I don't even know what to call it, but might be a supportive tool to work with, an ally to work with. That might be a powerful practice for this Aquarius, Pluto and Aquarius time as well. It's very synchronistic with the water bearer and Pluto. It's like the black pearl.
Yeah. And a pearl is something created in the ocean, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Oh, well, I'm so glad that Magic Hour is back. I love sitting with you guys and sitting with spirit. So I hope that these messages were helpful and resonant. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your week, my loves.
For more information on Taylor and her work, go to angelsandamethyst.com or connect with her on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. She is the one verified account with this name and will never DM you for a reading. If you have any questions about intuition, spirituality, angels, or anything and everything magical, please email contact@magichourpod.com. We will answer listener questions once a month in our solo episodes. Are you an aligned business owner that would like to advertise to our beautiful hummingbird community? Please email contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss the magic. And don't forget to leave us 5 sparkling star reviews. They help more magical people find the pod. Please screenshot and email your 5-star reviews to contact@magichourpod.com, and we'll send you a free downloadable angelic meditation and enter you to win an angel reading with Taylor Page. If you review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, we'll add your name twice. And if you share the podcast on your Instagram story and tag us, we'll add your name a third time. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 222 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Thank you for listening to Magic Hour with Taylor Page. Remember, you are magic.